Welcome, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Great. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces and at the same time, so many faces I haven't met or seen yet. So I just want to offer and extend a warm welcome to all of you for joining us today. I'm Renee Weeks. I am the co-chair of the Vermont Coalition to End Homelessness, and I'm also the Director of Shelter and Clinical Services at the Upper Valley Haven here in White River Junction, Vermont. As we start today, I would really like to take a moment to thank Governor Scott for his proposal he announced yesterday that includes a one-time investment of $20 million to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, on top of the annual appropriation of $10.8 million from the property transfer tax revenues, plus a $4 million through a capital bill, which is a total investment of $34.8 million for affordable housing. So thank you, Governor Scott, for that proposal. And my co-host will now introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Whitmore. I'm the co-chair of the Chittenden County Homeless Alliance and also the Director of Rental Assistance at the Burlington Housing Authority. I would like to invite you to join us after the vigil for a short video that was created by the Vermont Affordable Housing Coalition. The video offers a variety of perspectives and aims to bring to light some of the major challenges surrounding homelessness in Vermont. You'll also hear new voices that were not represented in live testimony earlier today. We hope to show the video via Zoom, but as you know, technology can be a challenge, so it will also be available on the Vermont Affordable Housing Coalition's YouTube channel. And before I turn things back over to Renee, I'd like to thank Sarah Phillips from the the State Office of Economic Opportunity for her commitment to supporting Vermont's homeless service system and her dedication to ending homelessness for all Vermonters.
Thank you, Liz. I wanted to just quickly point out my background photo here. This actually is a real photo that I took almost exactly a year ago while doing tent outreach here in White River. It was January 22nd of 2020, and it was 18 degrees when our team went out to check on people. And I think that most Vermonters do not see or witness the crisis of homelessness in our state. And for me, it was really helpful to be able to see it, to believe it. And I think many of us need that. One thing that the COVID-19 pandemic has done, it's helped made this invisible crisis of homelessness in our state visible to others who don't typically see it. 1 year ago, we had about 1,000 people experiencing homelessness. And today there's over 2,000 people in the hotel systems and even more than that. So it's doubled. And there's so many more Vermonters who are precariously housed and at the brink of experiencing homelessness. I think we all want the best for Vermonters, and people need to have their basic needs of food, shelter, and a sense of safety and security before they can even have the bandwidth to attend to their own health care and mental health care needs. Sadly, this year, I've known many people who've died while experiencing homelessness. They've died alone, in a hotel room, or out in a tent. And if we want Vermonters to be healthy, we need to house Vermonters. I'd like us to take a moment to remember those who have passed away in the past year who were experiencing homelessness in our state. Let's remember and honor the lessons they've taught us while they were here with us. So we'll take us that moment of silence now. Thank you. And up next, we have a great lineup of speakers today. Our first speaker is Lieutenant Governor Molly Gray, who's just joined us. And before her being elected as Lieutenant Governor, she was the Assistant Attorney General in Vermont and also taught law at the Vermont Law School. So we welcome her, and little does she know that I love her parents' produce stand in Newberry, and I am a frequent flyer there. So welcome, Molly. We're so happy you could join us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Erhard. Thank you to the Vermont Affordable Housing Coalition for the opportunity to speak at today's vigil and Awareness Day. I know that normally this event is held outside, and I think it's a real testament to everyone here today to bring the event inside and to still make it possible. I think it goes without saying that the last year has truly exposed what so many here today have known far before this pandemic, which is that so many Vermonters have struggled and continue to struggle with access to affordable, quality, and permanent housing. I'd like to recall just some of the statistics. One of the statistics was mentioned earlier. First, that Vermont is the 16th most expensive state in the nation when it comes to affordable housing or a housing wage. To afford a 2-bedroom apartment, Vermonters on average need to make $23 an hour, which, as we all know, is far more than the minimum wage here in the state. On average, 48% of Vermonters renting apartments spend 30% of their income still on rent. When it comes to the most marginalized groups in our communities, 1% of Vermonters, as we know, identify as African American, yet 8% of African Americans in Vermont experience homelessness. And as was already said, this month, 2,512 adults and 386 children reside in hotels and motels across the state as part of the emergency voucher system launched in response to this pandemic. It's no secret that Vermont's leadership, but specifically the hard work of so many here today to launch and continue this emergency voucher system, saved lives and set Vermont's response apart from the country. For this tireless work in these most challenging times, I join so many in thanking you. But the work, as you all know, is far from over. As we look to recover stronger from this pandemic, we have an opportunity to rethink everything anew. We cannot go back. We know that. We have to go forward. We have a chance to turn our greatest challenges, into our greatest opportunities, making the success of housing during this pandemic not just a crisis response, but a permanent response. I know you'll hear from legislative leaders today and from members of the Scott administration about the critical permanent initiatives, the funding, and the legislation underway and to come. So I won't talk about that. But I'll close with a paraphrase by a human rights leader that I respect and look up to often, the late Eleanor Roosevelt, who often asked and answered, "Where does human rights begin? It begins right here in our communities at home." It begins with addressing housing as a human right, housing as healthcare. I look forward to working with the legislature, with the governor, and all of you to address this most important human right and the human dignity of all Vermonters. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor Gray. Next, I'd like to introduce Marie Lennon. Marie is from Middlebury, and she has lived experience of homelessness that she would like to share with us.
Thank you, Liz. My name is Marie Lennon, and I live in Middlebury. I want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having us here to voice our concerns and our experiences. I am a member of the Vermont Coalition to End Homelessness, and I am also a member of the Legislative Committee. Homelessness is very, very personal to me because I was homeless myself back in 2016. After losing my mom, my dad, and my late husband within 5.5 months of each other, I lost the three most important people in my life. I was at my lowest. And I was still living in the house that my husband and I had, but the bills started getting a little out of hand, the water, sewer, that kind of thing. So I ended up moving out and not having a place to go. I ended up at the Charter House. The Charter House Coalition is a wonderful, wonderful program. The people that work there were very, very nice to me, understood me being scared and actually terrified. I did not know what was coming up next. I had never experienced homelessness when I was younger. My dad had a very good job, and we had no question of whether we were going to have a roof over our heads or food on the table. In 2016, I was homeless for 6 months, from March 1st until the beginning of April, when I found the apartment that I'm living in now. For 2 months, I was at the Charter House, and then from there, I went up to the John Graham Shelter in Virginia, and everybody up there was wonderful. They made a very, very difficult time a little bit easier. In the beginning of this pandemic, we had 250 people in Middlebury that were staying either at the Marriott or one of the local hotels in town. And that was thanks to a program through the state of Vermont. Throughout the pandemic, amazingly, we have been able to feed everybody that's either at the hotels or the motels 3 meals a day with people delivering them. It started out with the Middlebury College students, and then when the Middlebury College food services could not do it anymore, the Charter House picked up in the crisis, and they have been doing this since then. Amazingly, during the crisis, we were able to pull things together, and everybody worked together amazingly. Another concern that I have is healthcare for the people that are homeless. Just for instance, if one of the families, mother or father, lost their job because of the pandemic, they also lost their health care at the same time. Health care is not a privilege, it's a human right. Housing is not a privilege, it's a human right. And I feel so strongly that we need to keep pulling together and working together. I thank Governor Scott for the grant, and we will be able to get some more affordable housing. That's one of the main problems. The affordable housing is just not there. And this year, with the vouchers, we did not have enough vouchers to cover everybody. And that's kind of scary too. Again, I would like to thank you for having me and letting me voice my concerns. And thank you very much for this Homelessness Awareness Day, making it public. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie, for sharing your story. We really appreciate it. And for all the work that you're doing to spread awareness about homelessness and to support folks in your community. Next, I'd like to introduce newly elected President Pro Tem, Senator Becca Balint of Brattleboro. Since being elected to the Vermont Senate in 2014, Senator Balint has shown a commitment to supporting renters, low-wage workers, and Vermonters in need of housing. In her time as Senate Majority Leader, Senator Balint shored up the votes to pass Vermont's largest housing bond in decades, which secured much-needed housing for hundreds of Vermonters. Senator?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Can you hear me all right? I'm Senator Becca Balint, and I represent Windham County. And as was said in the introduction, I'm the new President Pro Tem of the Senate. I live in Brattleboro with my wife and 2 kids. And before I get started on my formal remarks, I too want to thank Marie for sharing her thoughts with us and her experiences, because that is what keeps us grounded in this work, when people are courageous and honest and share with us their lived experience. So thank you, Marie, for doing that. This is my 4th term serving on the Economic Development and Housing Committee in the Senate. And I found that my work on housing issues has been some of the most rewarding work that I've done in the legislature. And as I was thinking about this event, I was reflecting on how challenging it is to describe to my own children what it is that I actually do. And one morning, on a particularly frustrating drop-off at school with my young daughter, she snapped at me and said, "You know, Mom, you make the laws. You could outlaw school." And the potential merits of her plan notwithstanding, I explained to her that I am actually one of 180 legislators, and I'm not actually a monarch, but of course she didn't care. But as we watched the snow block building take shape on Flat Street in downtown Brattleboro, I had a beautiful example to use to explain to her the work that I do. And I said to her, I helped secure the funding for that building, and more people have decent, affordable housing because I and my colleagues fought hard for that money. So my kids understand that, and they get why I love my work. And I didn't always comprehend the critical importance of housing. It's been a long journey for me to truly understand how housing sits at the nexus of so many of the problems in our communities across the state and our nation. And whether it's workforce challenges, income disparity, ongoing mental health crisis, our acute struggles in Vermont with the opioid crisis, housing is a key component of the solution. It's also an important component for the physical and emotional health of families and communities across Vermont. And I don't need to tell all of you, because you know it so well, Vermont still needs a lot more housing units. And despite all of our great work over the past several legislative sessions, we still have so much work to do to end homelessness here in Vermont. But I work with a truly excellent team in the Senate, and my colleagues on the Economic Development and Housing Committee have been true champions on this issue, particularly Chair Michael Sirotkin and Vice Chair Allison Clarkson. And I believe one of my former colleagues on that committee, Senator Hooker, is on this call. She has also been a real champion on this issue. We're also grateful to our 2 money chairs in the Senate, Senator Jane Kitchell and Ann Cummings, both of whom really understand the importance of continuing to build more housing, to rehab older housing, and to make sure that we don't rest until every Vermonter has a home. And we're so grateful to the work that Ginny Lyons does in health and welfare, because she gets it. She understands that safe housing is an important part of raising healthy children. So, and of course, all of you Whether you're a legislator, whether you're a partner out in the field, all of you, you know that it takes many hands to do this work, and you've been incredible partners in this work. It's a labor of love for so many of us. And we know that healthy families and robust communities start with safe homes and warm homes. And because I'm not just a legislator, but I'm also a writer, I often center myself in the legislative work that I do by turning to writers who inspire me. And they keep up my hope and my positive feeling, because this work is so hard. So one of those writers that I turn to often is an essayist named Rebecca Solnit. And I often find wisdom and direction in her words. And she wrote this about the concept of home. She said, the desire to go home, that is a desire to be whole, to know where you are, to be the point of intersection of all the lines drawn through all the stars, to be the constellation maker and the center of the world. That center called love. To awaken from sleep, to rest from awakening, to tame the animal, to let the soul go wild, to shelter in darkness and blaze with light, to cease to speak and be perfectly understood. That, she said, that is home. May these words give you strength and hope like they give to me. Thank you for all that you do to house Vermonters. And thank you for still believing that change is possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Berlin. That was a beautiful poem. I want it in writing. You'll have to email it to me. Thank you. Our next speaker is a gentleman who has experienced homelessness in the past. After a long career, he found himself homeless in 2019 due to losing his job due to an illness. And he is a transgender man. He is the man, the myth, and the legend, the one and only Sean Elseth.
Thank you, Renee. Is my face all red for that? Thank y'all for having me here. I appreciate it. And thank y'all that are making changes for the homeless people out there. One thing I want to say to Renee is thank you for honoring the ones that passed away. I met a guy when I was in the motel named Ray that passed away this year under a bridge, and he was homeless. Thank you for that. I want to read y'all something that I wrote while being at the Haven or the Hickson House. First, I never thought I'd be homeless in a million years. I've always worked 2 jobs just to have everything that I needed. So with that said, I'll read y'all what I wrote, and I won't talk too fast because my accent, y'all might not understand texting. I'm better at articulating my words through my writings. I can't express my gratitude enough for your patience with me and trust. I know I'm high maintenance. My mama babied me my whole life due to me being sickly when I was born and formed. My immune system was always low. Being sickly was all I've known. But your patience in me, and I don't know how you didn't choke me at times, I'm sure in your mind you wanted to. My difficult wasn't meant to aggravate nor elevate. I never rested well nor settled easily at the Hickson House Hotel. Due to my PTSD, anxiety, and background working in a prison, not trusting anyone around me never came easily. I read people well. I've had to play a role in me that wasn't the full true me. which at times was hard to upkeep. Actually, it would mentally drain and strain me, which at times, excuse me, drain and strain me. I'm no better than he or she, so please don't get me wrong, for I too am not that strong. Depending on staff was very difficult for me, for you see, I literally know how it feels not to be free. Understanding inmates locked away in prison, losing their independence and self, I now see how their minds got lost in a world so unfamiliar as I was losing myself daily. My sleep became more off, nightmares of wondering how I got to a place like this in my life from the human race, realizing finally we are all one paycheck away from living astray. Homelessness hits upon you. Turning points in my life has been one great big lesson. Living in a shelter, not being so free nor me, dealing with my pain, working so hard in my life, hiding it from myself and others to see the whole real me. It came to the surface for the world to see. Trying to understand and deal with those different emotions was one of the hardest tests of my life. My fight to live dwindled to dust, wanting to be nothing but ashes to dust. Fighting the urge each minute of the day to just stay. My mind scared me with how I would end my life. That fight was just a shimmer of a light. Feeling everyone's emotions and pain, the craziness of each other's minds gained power over mine. I would try to get lost in my war, crying daily. My soul was getting more lost in this cold ass war, but that shimmering light shines so bright. It sparked that one tiny ounce of hope I had to just make it and not lag. For here I am to begin again. I'm standing tall right next to that wall I was going to fall from. It's not going to be the last for my past, but from here I will move forward, for I owe it to all, to the warriors who got lost in that war, called our last hope in the world. The mind, people, you seem to be blind to the fact we are all are one paycheck away from a homelessness state. I hope that really hits everybody, because that rings true of what I felt being homeless.
Thank you for sharing with us, Sean. That was beautiful. And I really appreciate your courage in telling your story.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Speaker of the House, Representative Gerald Krawinski of Burlington. Representative Krawinski has served in the House since 2012 and has been a leader in the legislature's response to helping Vermonters during the COVID-19 pandemic. Representative.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Well, afternoon now, right? It's so great to be with you all today. It is definitely a different experience having this moment with you indoors instead of outdoors, having experienced so many of this annual event outside the front of the State House. I really just have to take a moment to thank Marie and Sean for sharing your stories and experiences and the courage that you have. I will absolutely be carrying your stories and experiences with me as we do our work this legislative session. You know, the housing and homelessness crisis we have experienced throughout this pandemic has been unprecedented and further highlights the work we need to do to increase safe and affordable housing in all 14 counties. It has been distressing to see the level of individuals and families that have been forced to take shelter in hotels and motels during this pandemic. My thoughts and just, the beginning of this event, taking time to remember those we lost was incredibly moving. And I just send my thoughts out to those who have lost family members and friends. It is incredibly, incredibly hard. And when we process this loss together, it is important that we honor and celebrate our community housing partners that have not missed a beat to rise to meet this incredible challenge of housing people. I'm really proud of the work that Representative Tom Stevens and Representative Ann Pugh have done with their committees to respond to the housing crisis before this pandemic and during this pandemic. I just want to recognize we have many House members here joining us today. Thank you for being here. I was incredibly happy to hear the proposed investment in housing in the governor's budget, and I know our committees and our House members will do their due diligence to ensure that this money is allocated to create the biggest impact possible for housing in Vermonters. You know, this pandemic has taken a toll on all of us, but we cannot afford to lose this opportunity to build a recovery plan that works for all Vermonters and leaves no one behind. I know that housing is essential in lifting up Vermonters and having spaces that support the physical and mental well-being of individuals and families. And it sets them on a course for independence and makes our communities stronger. So thank you so much to all of you, each and every one of you, for what you do to help Vermonters and to house Vermonters. Thank you so much for having me here today. And I really enjoyed hearing these stories. Thanks again, Sean and Marie.
Thank you so much, Representative Krawinski. Next, I would like to introduce Zachary Hughes from Hilliard, who's going to share his story with us.
Good morning. I'm Zach Hughes, and good afternoon. And this is just kind of weird being away from the State House doing this. So I just wanted to talk about when someone asked if I've been homeless, I was homeless for one night, and it actually saved me from doing something really foolish when I was younger. I was thinking about running away from all my problems here, but I ended up getting stranded in Burlington one night, and I checked into the shelter up there, and it really opened my eyes. That event changed history for me. And the other thing that really opened my eyes was actually attending an eviction hearing with one of my clients. You know, before seeing that eviction hearing, it was kind of like, you know, whatever. But after seeing that, it really drove home some important aspects. And I agree with our one of our speakers, Sean, that we're all one paycheck away from homelessness. But I wanted to talk about an awesome opportunity everyone has here today and will continue, hopefully well after this pandemic. And that is that we were able to come together. Sure, before the pandemic, we were able to kind of come together, but we were doing a lot of talking, and it felt to me like we weren't really able to bust through some of these gates that we were suddenly able to do. And I just really think that that is something we can take away from this, that we can be creative, we can find ways to get it done. You know, and I want to point out to everybody here, not everybody right now is in shelter or hotel. There are people still either precariously housed or on the street. I have at least 3 on my workload. The work I'm doing right now as I speak to you is volunteer. In addition, I'm employed doing mental health work, but this is my volunteer side of it. And I think, as I said, I want to go away from today acknowledging that we can continue this opportunity. I urge lawmakers and everybody at the tables to continue to be creative. If we can do it, hopefully we don't get much more red tape. That's what I like about what I do, is I try to get things done behind the scenes. And I just really want to thank people like Marie and Sean for talking this morning about this, because it's very powerful. And real quick in closing, I just want to say one of the most powerful moments for me was before the pandemic. I had visited a homeless encampment at in front of one of our churches, and it was going to be really cold that night. And having to go away from that encampment and leave people there was very hard for me. I took a picture of that moment, took a picture of me in that moment. And I just, as I said, let's come together, let's continue working together. And as Ann Pugh said earlier this morning, hopefully we don't have to continue to have homeless awareness days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zach, so much. I agree with you. I hope we don't need to continue to have this day at some point. Our next speaker is Commissioner Sean Brown, who served as our deputy commissioner from 2014 to 2020. And he was appointed in June of 2020, right in the middle of a pandemic, to become our next commissioner for the Department of Children and Families. And he and his team have done an amazing job since he's taken over. So I appreciate that, Commissioner.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you. The Governor, Scott, and Secretary Smith sends their regards and regrets that they weren't able to be here today. Unfortunately, their schedules didn't allow for it in responding to the pandemic. I am truly humbled and honored to be here, to be with such an amazing group of people. Marie, Sean, and Zachary, thank you for sharing. I couldn't have said what you've said any better in terms of Zach breaking down the barriers and continuing to make progress and be creative. We have seen so much happen in the last 10 months that I could have never imagined happening. I still remember phone calls on a weekend in March when we were just beginning to understand what the pandemic meant and how it was impacting Vermont and the incredible health scare that it presented itself, and making decisions to quickly move vulnerable Vermonters from shelters into motels, and then the decision to just house everyone in motels and do away with the very restrictive eligibility rules in the emergency housing program. At the time, we were serving maybe 200 households in motels just before the pandemic. Now we are serving over 1,900 households. As Renee indicated earlier, we have over 2,200 adults in motels across the state and over 400 children. We have seen homelessness increase in ways that we've not seen before. We didn't recognize how the pandemic was going to tear at the social and economic fabric of Vermont. And we did respond in ways to make sure that all homeless Vermonters had a safe place to go and had food to sustain themselves. And we are committed to continuing that work to keep people safe through the pandemic. But I will agree with all of the speakers that we're not done. We have seen the pandemic exacerbate the housing market. We have people fleeing urban and suburban areas of New England and other parts of the country, coming to Vermont, given our response and the relatively safety that people believe exists here, given our state's response to the pandemic. That has just put further pressure on the housing market and stressed families who are seeking housing, permanent housing, whether an apartment or a place to buy of their own. The real estate market has gone crazy in the state, and it's just putting continuing pressure. We know the answer to the problem is units. We see that we have the rental assistance, we have the support services in place to support. The third leg of that stool for permanent housing is units. And notwithstanding the housing bond several years ago and the 800 units that brought on, the money that was recently allocated of the Corona relief funds to the Vermont Housing Conservation Board to build new units. And now with the governor's proposed investment of another over $20 million for more units and rehabilitation of existing units. You know, with the numbers we have in motels, that all of that will be needed and more. And so we need to continue to work together as teams and be creative and work to support our homeless fellow Vermonters to make sure that they do have a place of their own to stay. Because we all recognize while a hotel room is keeping people safe through the pandemic, it is not a home. It is not a place for children who need to be going to school to be staying, or elderly Vermonters who are struggling with underlying health conditions of their own. That's no place for them to call home as well, or single parents, or you know, all across the board. A hotel room is a temporary solution. And while we should all be proud of the work we've done in response to the pandemic, you know, the real challenge lies ahead in how do we move forward and capitalize on the unique opportunities that the pandemic has presented us in terms of funding opportunities, so that we can leverage that, so that homelessness is rare and brief in this state moving forward. Because right now the pandemic has torn at the lives of Vermonters and increased homelessness by almost twofold, given the economic crisis and just the stress that it puts on families. We still see too many families coming into the system every week who are experiencing homelessness for the first time or a reoccurrence. And we really do want to leverage you know, those relationships that we have only strengthened through the pandemic, so that you know, we do meet the needs of all Vermonters to make sure they all have a permanent place to call home. That is our goal, and that's our commitment moving forward. And I really look forward to continuing to work with all of you. It's looking back over the last 10 months, I just wouldn't imagine we are where we are right now last March. And so I couldn't be more proud to work with such an amazing group of talented people across the state who've done so much work and been incredible partners throughout the pandemic and in the months to come. And so thank you all.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. And we are way over time. I'm sorry about that. I had a long list of people to thank, but I really would like to just take a brief moment to thank our hardworking congressional staff and our delegation for making federal funding opportunities available so we could keep people in safe spaces and reducing the risk of contraction of COVID-19. And that's been hugely successful. We have a lot to be proud of as Vermonters here. And also a very huge shout out and thank you to all of our unsung heroes, those homeless service providers and providers that were going door to door in hotel rooms, doing health screenings, check-ins, getting people the things that they needed while they're experiencing homelessness during a pandemic. Our providers were there and ready to go, and we appreciate you and appreciate you all for being here and acknowledging this crisis that needs to be addressed. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
And if folks have time to stay and watch the video on the Zoom call, that would be great. Otherwise, it'll be available on the YouTube channel later today.
Everything's relative, right? So I think Vermont does a fairly good job at mitigating homelessness. However, we still have up to 2,000 to 4,000 people experiencing homelessness in Vermont. And to me, that is absolutely unacceptable.
In the past year, the COVID-19 pandemic exposed the hidden extent of Vermont's ongoing homelessness crisis. Vermont was able to house thousands of homeless individuals through motel vouchers. While this has helped keep Vermonters safe and healthy during the pandemic, we know that it's not a permanent solution. Homeless and precariously housed Vermonters are confronting an affordable housing crisis. As we recover from this public health crisis here in Vermont, we have the unique opportunity to rethink our social and economic systems. We need compassionate safety nets, rental assistance, and supportive services that work for everyone, and we need more affordable housing. Most of all, we need to listen to those that know the crisis the best, people who work closely with homeless folks and people who've lived through homelessness themselves. Together, we can end homelessness in Vermont.
My name's John. I am a father of two, divorced unfortunately, but we co-parent, and that's why I'm up here in Vermont.
My name is Marie Lennon. I live in Middlebury, Vermont.
First, my name's Sean Elsis, and I moved up to Vermont in 2011 due to me being transgender. So I gave up my career working for the state of Texas as a lieutenant because of the harassment I was getting down south. So I thought it'd be easier and it was a lot easier for me to transition up here.
Well, my name is Kathy Curley, and I used to always say that everybody is always one check away from being homeless. And I spent my 61st birthday in my car.
My landlord informed me that he was finally selling out after years and years. The new owner had deep pockets and was renovating the building and kicked everyone out, turned the top floor that three of us gentlemen lived on with a shared bathroom in an affordable manner in a nice neighborhood of Burlington, turned that into one apartment that was multiple thousands of dollars a month.
I had to stop working July 21st of 2019. So in August, all my savings and all my money I had, I couldn't afford to pay for housing anymore, which ended up me being in the streets. And it was the first time for me to ever be homeless.
I had been in an apartment, but due to the mental health issues, that's what really kind of cascaded everything into my homelessness situation and my further decline in mental health and different things like that.
Homelessness is it's the worst feeling ever. And it's the worst feeling when people look at you in a different light, like you're not a human being. And that's how I felt.
It was a little embarrassing because here I am 61 years old and I have nowhere to live.
I've always been a people person, but when I was at the Charter House, I was so withdrawn.
People are doing everything they can to not be in these situations, and the systems that exist are just challenging, whether it's low wages, navigating mental health challenges or substance use challenges.
I a lot of times work with people who don't necessarily qualify as literally homeless, which is frustrating sometimes because of the access to different resources is different. I think a lot of times it's just so confusing because there's so many different entities that they have to interact with.
We can't build a system or have a system that is so fragmented. right? Right now, people have to apply for services and benefits in so many different ways. It's incumbent upon us as a society, as a community, to make this understandable, accessible, integrated, holistic, so people aren't jumping around to different systems in order to get their care.
My social worker, who is a very thoughtful person, also, they let me take the wheel. They're like, if you're ready, cool. If you're not, take the time you need. He was always open to being flexible with me, letting me kind of figure it out.
It's hard for somebody on the outside looking in at us to say, just do this, just do that. That's not an option. It's not that simple, man.
The biggest barrier is that there is not affordable housing. The Vermont housing market is stretched extremely thin. And even though people are working, they are able to, live off benefits. They can't afford to pay rent and live.
Affordable is $1,200 a month. Everybody I know, their checks are $1,200 a month. So that would be 100% of their income.
Yeah.
$1,000, even $800 a month is not affordable, and there's nothing out there at $800 a month.
You can't expect us Vermonters at our pay scale, and with the pandemic that's going on, expect to stay competitive with people that come from out of state.
And if you get onto a waiting list for like the Commons, which is over by Shaw's, or Briarwood, which is over that way also, you may be on the waiting list for over a year. And what do you do during that year?
Even if we wanted to house everyone that's experiencing homelessness today, the affordable housing doesn't exist to do that.
From an operations standpoint, the impact has been tremendous. We were originally a strong volunteer base. We lost a lot of our volunteers, not because they don't want to be with us, but because of the risks related to COVID.
All of my workarounds were like coffee shops to plug in, and the gym to get a shower, and buffets that I would bring stuff back for and create a meal out of it. And it would just stretch money. And I didn't have to use soup kitchens, And I did that for that was the end of my fifth winter of doing that. Suddenly, all of those workarounds were gone overnight in the middle of March when the world shut down.
The motel voucher system has been a godsend. We've gotten a lot of people off the street into safe housing. We kind of have a system here where, they have a place where they can be clean and sober. They can come into the office and vent and talk.
I think that has been a powerful moment for all of us to say, wait a minute, why would we go back to where we were? Why would we go back to congregate shelter settings that are unhealthy in terms of public safety, that are stigmatizing, and that don't allow people the personal space and the ability to move forward?
I think it's pretty misunderstood in terms of what it is to be homeless. We have people who work full-time jobs, but find themselves homeless just due to very other drastic circumstances in their life.
I worked my whole life. I worked full-time. I reared two children who have turned out okay. My older son has a degree from Plattsburgh and a degree from UVM. I have a couple of degrees, most recently in the 80s from a school called Johnson State College. It's not called that any longer. Yeah. So I very much played by the rules. I used to own a home, and here I am.
I never, ever in a million years thought that I'd have to stop working or I would ever end up homeless. Now, I'm guilty of this. I always thought homeless people were drug addicts or alcoholics that just didn't give a crap about their lives. And that was wrong of me to think that way after being put in that situation because we're all one paycheck away from being homeless.
The homelessness situation right now is a crisis. Everybody needs to pull together. Communities need to pull together. Towns need to pull together and help. If we can get the extra help, we might be able to get out of the crisis easier.
We need more subsidy vouchers. We need more affordable housing because it's just not there. It just isn't. And we have a lot of low income families.
If you make one way to try and help everyone, it's definitely not gonna capture everything. Sure, it would capture like maybe even you could say a majority of being helpful. And that's awesome, right? Because it's like those people need help. They're taking advantage of it, great. But all the people that don't get caught in that, how do you address that, you know?
We need systemic changes in this country, and that means raising the minimum wage. That means creating more affordable housing, and that means affordable health care and equitable food access, good nutritious food for all.
If we don't see the needle moving in the next couple of years, it's simply because it hasn't become a true priority when it comes to our time, energy, and resources as a community.
Well, thanks for sticking with us, folks. This is Earhart from the Affordable Housing Coalition. I hope everyone was as moved by that video as I was. I want to thank everyone who was involved in today, all the lawmakers that made time for us, folks who spoke, folks who told their stories, courageous acts to tell your stories, and also all the service providers and the folks who are in the helping professions to try and make folks' lives better, especially during this pandemic. I would be remiss if I didn't say a really heartfelt thank you to Sarah Fleming and Talia Gunsberger, our vistas at the Vermont Affordable Housing Coalition. Sarah and Talia helped stand up this day, which was incredibly challenging on Zoom, and they also are responsible in the greatest part for that video. I'll also send a shout out to Dan Reed, who's the son of our steering committee chair, Cindy Reed, who's a videographer and really pulled that together over the last week. So I hope you all were moved by that and that gave you some more insight, and that the whole morning, the whole day has given everyone some real insight on what it means to be homeless in Vermont and what we need to do to really change the story. So thank you all. And there's one last event, which is if you could tune in on the House of Representatives YouTube channel. There will be at some point when they convene after 1:15 a reading of a brief resolution commemorating the day today, and probably some remarks from Chair Stevens on the virtual floor of the House. So thank you everybody for participating. Thank you Renee and Liz for emceeing, and I'm sure I'm forgetting lots of people, but yeah, this has been an awesome awesome collaborative effort. And for lawmakers that are still tuning in, I hope this helps inform your deliberations for the remainder of this session, and that you keep in mind what y'all heard today. There's Tom. Thank you, Tom. Thanks for your time this morning in your committee. And if Representative Pugh is still on, thanks for your committee time and joining us. And I don't see Senator Sirotkin. I think he was having a little trouble getting into the Zoom, but our thanks to him for his committee time as well. And thank you all.